إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. أما بعد, we start in the name of Allah the Most High, the one to whom belongs all praise, the one who controls all affairs, the one who gives, the one who takes, glorified and exalted is He. And we send peace and blessings upon the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam and his family and his followers until the end of time. Ameen. One of the core things that we see in the message of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam is an emphasis on the revolution of the heart. And the word revolution sometimes in our modern context gets misunderstood from its original usages in the English language as well as in the Arabic language. The word revolution in English, oftentimes now we associate it with political upheavals, we associate it with violence, discord, problems in societies, but actually the word was originally used in reference to usually the revolutions of celestial bodies. That you have moons or you have stars or you have planets that go around in particular orbits. And as they go around in their orbit, they actually come back to the beginning of their pattern. So they make this revolution around this space. And even in the Arabic language, you have this idea of kind of turning as part of the meaning of the original word, the word that's used to describe it today, oftentimes inqilab, that there's a turning of what's going on in the society, which we translate as revolution, but in reality, it's just actually an idea of turning, because the heart is yanqalib. The heart is that which turns. It moves from one side to the other. And so the word that's used here is also a similar word. Now, why does this matter? It's because the revolution of the heart and the teachings of the Prophet ﷺ is largely a turning. It is a turning of the heart back to that which matters. It is a turning of the heart back to where it needs to be at its most deep and core level. It's a turning because, as we talked about last time I was here, the message of Islam is the message of fitrah. It's the message of the original guidance and the original way of human beings. So it is not that our heart needs great changing, necessarily. It is not that our hearts, we have to completely erase what's there and then fill it from new, but it's that we just need to turn back to Allah. And the Prophet ﷺ teaches us in so many different ways what the consequences of that turning are. And he teaches us also how it is that we go through processes in our life that bring us closer back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then that has its impact on the ground in the lives of human beings. So when we look at this and we think about how do we see, what is it that happens when someone turns their heart? The Prophet ﷺ was someone, the highest example of what it means to have a heart that is connected to Allah, that is constantly looking at Allah regardless of the situations that are going on around him. So you see the Prophet ﷺ, for example, in the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, this agreement that happened between the Muslims and their enemies, the people of Quraysh and those others in Mecca. And they come and they approach the Prophet ﷺ with a particular agreement. And all of the companions, they look at this agreement as if it's a loss for the Muslims. It doesn't make sense to them. How can this possibly be something that's beneficial for us? Islam is on the higher position. Our enemies are actually on the decline. Why is it that we have to agree to this treaty that means we go home this year, we don't make the Umrah, all of these things. But the Prophet ﷺ, his heart is not connected with the immediate concerns around him. His heart is connected to Allah. And because his heart is connected to Allah, he's able to see multiple steps beyond. It reminds me of, it's a different example, but it relates to the idea of seeing beyond. When in my generation, one of the movies that was famous in those days was the story of Bobby Fischer. Maybe some people saw this film. It's about this American chess master, and he's playing in the game, and his coach is watching the game, and his opponent makes a move, and the coach says to himself, he just lost 12 moves from now. And he's hoping that the student is going to realize it. The 12 moves from now, he just lost the match. The Prophet ﷺ is looking multiple moves ahead because he's يَنْظُرُ بِنُورِ اللَّهِ. He has the insight of the believer who can see with the light of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so he sees beyond what's in front of him. And he agrees to the treaty, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls it فَتْحًا مُبِينًا, that this was a great victory. Something's happening right in front of him, but he has the calm, the connection to Allah that moves him past it. A more immediate example is the story of the Prophet ﷺ when he was resting under the tree, and a man came and snuck up and he wanted to kill him, and he had a sword in his hand, and he pointed the sword at the Prophet ﷺ, and he woke him up, and he said, when he woke up, he said, "Who's going to save you from me?" And the Prophet ﷺ said, "Allah." The man dropped the sword. And he picked up the sword and he said, "Who's going to save you from me?" And in that moment then the man came into the practice of Islam. He was struck by the awareness of the heart of the Prophet ﷺ is so tightly connected to Allah. This is the way that someone is when they do that. A story of one of the modern scholars who was in a situation, he was traveling to Southeast Asia, he had a very tight trip, it was very hectic and difficult and hard, and he's very old himself, and he's going through all of these things, and they get to the airport and they're very much late for the flight. You know how you feel when you're traveling? It's chaotic. And the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ is "Safar qit'atun min al-adab," that travel is a piece of punishment. It's hard. You go, you imagine what the Hujjaj are going through. May Allah make it easy for them. That you go through these trips, you pack your luggage, you try to get everything right. They show up at the airport, they're running late. They realize whoever got the Sheikh's visa, they got him the wrong visa. 3 months instead of 6 months. So all of the students, they're with them like, how can someone mess this up? Now we have the Sheikh and he's old and we put him through all this hardship and everything else. He said, I looked over at the Sheikh and the Sheikh is just sitting there with his hands on his cane smiling, reciting poetry. And I'm telling him, Sheikh, they got the wrong visa and this and that. He said, the Sheikh looked at me and he said, listen, if you take anything from this trip, take this. Al-Arifin, those who know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's the same to them whether or not they're given or it's taken. Whether or not something is given to them or something is taken to them, it's the same thing to them because it all comes from Allah. So if you take this from the whole trip, that's the only thing that matters. Shaykh just relaxed. Whatever's going to happen is going to happen. If it goes this way, it goes this way. If it goes that way, it goes that way. You go with whatever happens. The Prophet ﷺ, that ability to do that is the inheritance of the Prophet ﷺ. As Imam al-Busiri said, وَكُلُّهُم مِّن رَسُولِ اللَّهِ مُلْتَمِسٌ غَرْفًا مِّنَ الْبَحْرِ أَوْ رَشْفًا مِّنَ الدِّيَمِ. That every single one of them is taking from the way of the Prophet ﷺ. Some of them are taking entire handfuls of the ocean of his guidance, and some of them are grabbing onto some of the drops that they can get. But all of this is the inheritance of the Prophet ﷺ, to be in the remembrance of Allah, to get a heart that is very strong and firm. You know one of the places you can really test yourself in this? LA traffic. Seriously. You want to test your ability to stay calm in all kinds of different situations? Try LA traffic. Try LA traffic when you're the khatib. It's even worse. Jum'ah is the hardest. You have no leeway. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, all of a sudden there's an accident, there's this, there's that. You do whatever you need to do and you try to get wherever you need to go. So the Prophet ﷺ, he teaches us in his life a number of different movements. And by this I don't mean political or social movements. I mean actual physical movements. He teaches us through actual physical movements a number of processes by which the heart can turn. The heart can turn. The three major movements that we have in the life of the Prophet ﷺ is the movement from Mecca to the cave of Hira, where the revelation began. The next one is the movement from Mecca to the heavens in the journey and night ascension to Jerusalem and then to heaven. And the third one is the horizontal movement from Mecca to Medina. And the Prophet ﷺ in these movements is giving us different lessons, but all of them revolve around the same points. The two major points, you always have a vertical movement, the connection of the heart to Allah, and you always have a horizontal movement, the result of that vertical movement in life. One does not come without the other. You do not have a service that is successful to people in life without being connected to Allah. And you are not truly connected to Allah if that doesn't result in service on the ground. And so the Prophet ﷺ, in that first movement from Mecca to the cave of Hira, he goes up to this cave and he meditates and he thinks and he reflects and he's trying to understand the meaning of life. He's trying to understand how it is that he's supposed to worship Allah, and the revelation begins. We're very familiar with the story. The revelation begins, the Prophet ﷺ is told to read in the name of his Lord, and so on and so forth. And then what does he do? The vertical movement up the cave and then connecting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is part of it. The other movement is what? The Prophet ﷺ does what after he leaves the cave? He goes down. He leaves the cave. Imagine someone who's connected now to revelation. Someone who's in direct discourse through the intermediary of Jibreel alayhi salam with Allah Himself. He's receiving revelation. It feels so good. Right? In the early, very beginning part, he's worried a little bit, but later on, of course, now this is a connection to Allah. Does he just leave it there? No. He comes down. When he comes down and he meets his wife, Khadija radiallahu anha, she tells him something that also emphasizes this horizontal component. He tells her what happened. He tells her that I might be, what is this? Could it be jinn? Could it be whatever? Khadija radiallahu anha tells him, no, that is not what it is. This is from Allah. And she tells him why this is from Allah. She said, this is from Allah for these reasons. You take care of your family. You connect the family relations. You give aid to those who are oppressed. You feed those who are hungry. You shelter the orphan. She starts telling him all of these horizontal elements. All of these things that he does in his life on the ground to care for people who are in need. And to do that which is right. She tells him, Allah will not forsake you because you do these things. There's a connection then between the relationship with Allah and how it plays out on the ground. The first one then is in the cave of Hira. The second one is in the night journey and ascension, where the Prophet ﷺ goes in the night and he travels to Jerusalem and he leads all of the messengers in prayer, and then he ascends into the heavens and he meets different prophets, and then he goes with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and he receives the prayers, and the 5 daily prayers. And afterwards, after he receives the 5 daily prayers, what does he do? He comes back down. Same thing happens. He comes back down. He goes back to the people in Mecca, and not only does he go back to them, but he tells them what happened. Some things in the life of the Prophet ﷺ, we don't think about them so much, but they're actually subtle evidences that he was a prophet. Because if he wasn't a prophet, did he need to tell people about Isra and Mi'raj? I mean, think about it from a purely worldly perspective. Let's say someone right now had a dream, and that dream was not even a dream, that they actually went somewhere. They went in the middle of the night, Allah gave them a miracle, they went in the middle of the night, they traveled wherever, and they came back. You think they're going to tell people? What are people going to say about them? They say that they're crazy. It's the evidence that the Prophet ﷺ is the Prophet. That he told people that which for sure he was going to be called crazy for. Even his family asked him, don't tell the people. Somebody told him, this thing, we believe you, but don't tell people. If you tell people, they're going to ridicule you. He said, it's not my choice to tell people or not. This is something that Allah gave me. My job is the messenger. I deliver the message. And he goes and he tells people, I had this journey. I went to Jerusalem last night, and then I went into the heavens. I spoke to Allah. I got revelation. I came back. Imagine, subhanAllah, how people responded. And Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, he had the perfect response of a Muslim. See, the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, they were under a lot of attack and Islamophobia as well. They just had better responses usually. So we, for example, a lot of people accuse Islam of things. Islam says this, Islam says that. How do you guys believe this? Your messenger did so and so. All of this kind of stuff. Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, they came to him, they said, do you know what your friend is saying now? Your friend Muhammad, do you know what he's saying now? Abu Bakr said, no. He said, he's saying this and this and this, and he went to Jerusalem, he went to heavens. Abu Bakr says, if he said it, it's true. That's the answer. If he said it, if we can truly ascertain that the Prophet ﷺ said it, then it's true. There's no doubt about it. This is Abu Bakr's response. Then he gives them the reasoning behind it to show them this is not actually even blind faith. If he said it, it's true, and that's not blind faith. Actually that makes sense, because I believe him in something that's more serious than that. I believe him that revelation comes to him from heaven. That's a bigger deal than going to Jerusalem and going into heaven in the middle of the night. Revelation comes to him, that Allah speaks to him, that's bigger. So Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, he confirmed his belief in the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But also the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is giving us again that journey of turning the heart that has the vertical component and the horizontal component. He goes to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he receives the prayers come, and he comes back down and he carries the message to his people. Part of this transition, the ultimate transition actually, is in what we have in our prayers themselves. Sometimes we don't think so, but think about it. The prayer is a microcosm of this transition. This idea of connecting vertically and then horizontally, it's in the prayer itself. If you think about how the prayer works and you see the crucial apex position of the Prophet ﷺ in that journey, in that understanding. So you look at the prayer, what happens in the prayer? We stand to pray, we say Allahu Akbar. Allah is greater than everything. And we affirm that. And we go into direct discourse with Allah. We start in the name of Allah, we read the Fatiha, we say Allahu Akbar, we go Subhana Rabbi al-Azim, Subhana Rabbi al-A'la, we go through all of these parts of the prayer. You're directly connected to Allah in the prayer. Eventually you have to come out of prayer. How do we come out of prayer? At the very end of the prayer, right before we say salam, what do? What's the corner? Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala ali Muhammad kama sallaita ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim. We make the connection to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That the signal that we're going out of the prayer and back into real life is that we pray for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his family. We pray for Ibrahim alayhi salam and his family. Because the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Ibrahim alayhi salam, they show us what does it mean to live connected to Allah in real life. And after we pray for the Prophet ﷺ and his family and Ibrahim alayhi salam and his family, then what do? Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. We enter then directly into life. With the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being with us. The vertical connection then immediately comes into the horizontal. And the Prophet ﷺ shows us that again in the third major movement of his life, which is the hijrah. From Mecca to Medina. The third major movement is not that I have this community of believers that are connected to Allah and they believe in the hereafter and they want to do good and they stay away from that which is bad and they take care of the poor and they help the orphans and they help the refugees and they help the needy and they do all of these things. But actually that has to be embodied on a communal level. And so how does the communal embodiment of the message of Islam in real life and how it affects human beings? It occurs through the movement to Medina. And with the movement to Medina now you have the blossoming of a community that embodies all of those values of what it means in real life to live a life that is connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the Prophet ﷺ teaches us through these three major movements the idea of connecting vertically and then giving horizontally as we live our faith. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له أشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. When we look at these movements, we look at the revolution of the heart, then we think about what is it, if this happened in the life of the Prophet ﷺ, what do we have in our own lives that reminds us of this idea of the vertical and horizontal planes and helps us to reconfigure ourselves to connect to Allah and then to give back to humanity. And what's amazing about this is that when we think about that and we look at the 5 pillars of Islam, we realize that each of the 5 pillars is an embodiment of this concept. The first of the 5 pillars is Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. That I believe that Allah is, there's one God and Muhammad is His messenger. Immediately there's the vertical and the horizontal. As we already mentioned. You connect to Allah, you connect to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam of how to live it. The second one is prayer. which we already talked about in the first half, how that's a connection. There's the vertical connection in the worship itself, there's the horizontal connection in coming out of the worship and giving back to society around us. The third pillar is in zakat, the charity that we give every single year to the needy. And the charity also is a very clear connection of the vertical and the horizontal. It's one of the greatest worships of Islam. It is something that is truly between you and Allah, especially today in the modern world where you don't have zakat collectors, where you don't have governments that are distributing the zakat. The zakat is truly between you and Allah. And people are always trying to figure out ways, we call it, some of the imams, we started calling it zakat laundering. Everyone's trying to cheat their zakat somehow. How can I pay a little bit less? How can I give a little bit less? How do I get responsible for less? All of it is about giving as little as possible. And in the end, it's between the person and Allah. Whether or not they give their zakat or they don't give their zakat, something as simple as the intention changes whether or not it's zakat. Something as simple as whether or not you're giving it to who deserves it changes the zakat. Whether or not all of the money that you're giving is actually going to people who are in need is going to change it. So all of these things are between you and Allah, between me and Allah. But they're also about the person who's in need. So they have an actual, real, physical consequence in everyday life. The fourth pillar of Islam is fasting. Fasting, maybe some people, they don't see as clearly the connection. But the connection is made very clear by a description of the Prophet ﷺ. That fasting obviously is a very serious act of vertical connection to Allah, which is not to describe Allah by position, nobody misunderstand me, but just to facilitate the understanding of what we're talking about. You connect to Allah with fasting. And the Prophet ﷺ said, they said about him, he was كَانَ أَجْوَدَ النَّاسِ وَأَجْوَدُ مَا يَكُونَ فِي رَمَضَانِ. That the Prophet ﷺ was the most generous of people, and his most generous time is in the month of Ramadan. Why? Because when you're that connected to Allah, it has to show its consequence in life. So you see it. They said he was like a breeze that would not stop giving. The Prophet ﷺ in Ramadan was just his kindness and his generosity is spreading everywhere. And the fifth of the pillars that connects vertically and horizontally is the Hajj. The Hajj is the greatest gathering of human beings in all of existence. I mean, subhanAllah, the Hajj is absolutely miraculous. You try to tell people about it, you think in the modern world, Hajj is miraculous. Just rewind the mind 100 years. Before you have modern communications, before you have airplanes, before you have transits, before you have all of the stuff that we have now, rewind to then and tell me, subhanAllah, how miraculous is Hajj. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says they come on their feet and walking and they're riding and they come from all different angles. Truly, subhanAllah, they come from all directions. People save their entire life. SubhanAllah, there was one man, he was interviewed. If you're on Facebook, look up Humans for Hajj, Humans of Hajj. It's very beautiful. They're going around and interviewing people in Hajj and so on. They met this man from Iraq. They told him, we want to take a picture of you. He said, okay. They took the picture. He said, okay, now give me a copy of the picture. They said, well, it's a digital thing, so like if you have a phone like ours, then we can send you the picture. He said, okay, I don't understand. Forget it. And I've been selling sheep for the last 20 years or something to save up for the Hajj. Like, this is what I do. He's a very old man. Selling sheep, everything, saving up for the Hajj, they go on the Hajj. People in the middle of Asia are going on Hajj. People in Europe are going on Hajj. South American contingencies going on Hajj. Hajj is the most incredible connection to Allah and at the same time connection to other people. And what happens after Hajj? Hajj ends. You have to come back and live life again. You have to come back and carry the message of Islam. And the way of the Prophet ﷺ is constantly to connect and to give. To connect to Allah and give back. To connect to Allah and give back. How is it that I live my life? Is an important question for asking how is the quality of that vertical connection. Because in the end we are required to live the example of the Prophet ﷺ. And we are required to carry the example of the Prophet ﷺ. And part of that, in closing, is to maintain hope. I know, it's a lot of crazy things that happen. It's a lot of issues of discrimination. There's a lot of concern about stuff that's said in presidential campaigns. There's a lot of issues to be worried about. But maintaining hope is very, very important. And the Prophet ﷺ, when we read and study his life, we see that the Prophet ﷺ always maintained hope. I mean, imagine that in the battle of the trench, they're building this trench and they can't break the rock. And the Prophet ﷺ goes and he hits the rock and he says, we have the palaces of Rome and we have the palaces of Persia. But he's saying in the middle of a battle where they're worried that they're going to be completely wiped out. They're building a trench in the hopes that this huge army of Confederates will not destroy the entire city. And he's telling them about the victories that are going to come later on. So always the hope is there. Right in front of him, the hope is always there. And we have to realize that hope is there in small things and in big things. There is good in people. The good is there underneath. All it needs is a little bit of a revolution of the heart, a little turning of the heart. You touch someone in a way that they can understand, and their heart turns. You know, subhanAllah, there's so many stories of this. One of them I'll tell just quickly, that there's a brother in New York, he told this story about 9/11, 14 years ago. He said, 14 years ago I went to school, and I was in my classroom, and we were watching everything that was happening, and there was a kid in my class who, after he watched everything, he said, man, I hope we go to Afghanistan and we kill all of them. He said, this brother, he said to him, what do you mean kill all of them? Like, what do a bunch of innocent people have to do with this thing that happened? The guy said, what are you defending them right now and all of this kind of stuff? He said, I bet your dad was one of the people who flew the plane. The brother said, I grabbed him and I was about to punch him. And right when I was about to hit him, I saw this smirk on his face, like, yeah, I'm right. That's the way you guys are. He said, and I let him go. And I went away, and I took the high ground, the moral high ground, and I didn't do anything to this person. He said, on September 11th, this year, he woke up, not having spoken to this person for 14 years. And he opened his Facebook, and he looked in his messages, and there's a message from this person, from his class 14 years ago. And he says, you know what? You were right. I was wrong. He said, I served 2 shifts in Afghanistan. I met the people of Afghanistan. I know how good they are. And I was wrong. And you should have hit me on that day. But you didn't hit me. And you were right. SubhanAllah, 14 years. Out of nowhere the message comes. But this is the thing, SubhanAllah, when you plant good, good comes. You just don't know when it's going to come. And the message of the Prophet ﷺ is a message to always plant good. No matter what the circumstances are, no matter what's going on, you always plant good. And when you plant good and you feed it with the belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it eventually will bear its fruit. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide us to that which is good and to keep us away from that which is bad and harmful. We ask Allah, who is generous and merciful, to give us the good of this life and the next. O Allah, forgive us of our sins and our shortcomings, accept them as our deeds, enter us into paradise, and keep us away from your punishment. Help us to be sources of good and righteousness and kindness in all of our affairs. O Allah, give food to those who are hungry, give shelter to those who are shelterless, give refuge to those who are refugees, give victory to those who are oppressed. Help be in the aid of all of those who are struggling. Ya Rabbil Alameen. O Allah, give us knowledge that benefits us and benefit us from that which you have taught us. Allahumma ighfir lana dhunubana wa israfana fi amrina wa thabbit aqdamana. Allahumma barik fina wa bainana wa alif baina qulubina wa sufufina. Allahumma kun ma'ana wa la takun alayna. Unsur ikhwana al-mustada'afina fi kulli makan. Unsur ikhwana al-mustada'afina fi kulli makan. Iftah alayhim ya fatah ya alim. Allahumma alamna ma anfa'na wa anfa'na bima alamtana wa zidna ilman wa amalan salihan. Allahumma taqabbal minna wa'afu 'anna wa atina fi dunya hasana wa fil akhirati hasana wa qina عذاب النار. وصلى الله وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. وأقيموا الصلاة.